Today in class, we looked at polynomials of the form x squared plus bx plus c. We looked at where c is positive, where that constant is positive, and we also looked where b is positive. That's called the linear coefficient right there. So this was positive, and we learned how to factor those trinomials. We're going to look at a slightly different situation in the video, but c is still positive. So just like we started in class, I want you to take these two binomials. I want you to multiply them. I'll find the word in a minute. Multiply them, turn the video back on, check your answer. We'll talk about it. Okay, so for the first one, I got x squared minus 6x plus 8. For the second one, I got a squared minus 4a plus 3. Now, what do you notice? How is this the same from what we did in class? How is it different? All right, one thing to notice is c is still positive, just like it was in class. C is still positive, but this time the middle term, b, is negative. Okay, so this is positive, or c is positive, and b, the middle term, is negative. The next thing to notice is we're still looking at a sum and a product. 8 is the product of -4 and -2, and b here is the sum of -4 and -2. Still a sum, still a product. 3 is the product of -1 and -3. -4 is the sum of -1 plus -3. Okay? So still a sum, still a product, and those signs are what determine what we're going to put in our binomials when we factor. So, how are we going to do this? Just like we saw when everything was positive, this last number is a product. And the middle number is a sum, just like we saw in class today. Okay? Now, since this is positive, that's a product, how do we get a positive when we multiply? When we're multiplying to get a positive, we either have to have two positives or we have to have two negatives, right? So this last term being positive tells us that our signs have to match. That's important. If the last term is positive, it tells us our signs have to match because we're multiplying. And when you multiply two signs that match, you get a positive. Now, the middle sign, that's going to tell us to use this sign. Okay? Because it's a sum. If I'm multiplying two numbers and get a positive, but I add them and get a negative, that means they both have to be negative. Because a negative plus a negative, same sign, add and keep, would be a negative. A negative times a negative would be a positive. So you're going to set up your two sets of parentheses. Today, next couple days, all we're going to have is x squared. Our coefficient here is 1. How do we factor x squared? We're going to get x and x. So I know my signs have to match because this last term is positive. The middle term is negative, so they both have to be negative. Now, just like we did, we need factors of 8 that add to 6. So I'm going to list my factors of 8, 1 and 8, 2 and 4. Which of these add to 6? 2 and 4. So x minus 2, x minus 4. Remember to always check. So I'm going to multiply. I get x squared minus 4x minus 2x plus 8, which does in fact give me x squared minus 6x plus 8. Okay, you can always check and make sure you got it right. Now, let's look at the next one. N squared minus 5n plus 6. So I look at that last term. It's positive. That tells me my signs have to match. I look at the middle term. It's negative. I use that sign. So since they match, I use the middle sign, which is a minus sign. How do I factor n squared? The only way to factor that is n and n. I need factors of 6, because remember the last term's a product, so I need factors of 6 that add up to 5. So I list my factors of 6. What do I get? I have 1 and 6. I have 3 and 2. 3 and 2 will add to 5. So I put those in my parentheses. We could check it. We remultiply n squared minus 2n minus 3n, not m, plus 6. So n squared minus 5n plus 6. It does check. Remember, this is my actual answer. This down here is just the check. Okay? You try these next two. See if you can get them right. Pause the video, then turn it back on to check. So when I factored s squared minus 10s plus 16, I got the quantity s minus 8 times the quantity s minus 2. When I factored t squared minus 8t plus 12, I got the quantity t minus 6 times the quantity t minus 2. Down here, I just listed for you the factors of that last number to show you how I got the 2 that I put in the parentheses. I did not show my check. Okay, let's finish it up. What do you notice that's different about these? Well, if you notice, there's a variable at the back. So the only difference with these is that not only are you going to have this r that you have to deal with, there's an s that you have to deal with too. But it's very simple, not any big deal. It's a trinomial, so I know it will probably factor into 2 binomials. I look at r squared. I get r times r. I notice that the back has an s squared, so right now, so I don't forget it, I'm going to do s and s. Okay? Now, look at your signs. The last sign's positive. What does that tell me? The signs have to match because it's a product. They've either got to both be positive or both be negative. So I look at the middle sign, which is a sum. It's positive, so if I'm multiplying and getting a positive and I'm adding and getting a positive, that means they both have to be positive. Now, I'm going to look at factors of 50 to see what adds up to 15. I have 1 and 50, not going to do it. What, 2 and 25, doesn't add up to 15. 5 and 10, ding, 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 ding. There it is. So I'm going to put r plus 5, s, there, and r plus 10, s, there. It's going to be easy to forget this last variable when there is one there. So just make sure you don't forget it. We could check. We get r squared plus 10rs plus 5rs plus 50s squared, and it does, in fact, check. Okay? It works. Remember, you can check every factoring problem. All right, you pause the video, you try the last one on your own, then turn the video back on to check your work. I got the quantity y minus 5z times the quantity y minus z. There is a 1 here, but since I have a variable, you don't write it. So 5 times 1 gives you the 5, but we don't write it when we have another variable there. Okay? All right, make a note of any questions. We're going to practice where that last term is positive in class tomorrow.